Hi students, I thought it'd be easier to make a video this week instead of writing out instructions for your discussion post. Before you begin the discussion post, you need to make sure that you've watched in its entirety the YouTube TED Talk by Chimamanda Adichie. I believe I'm pronouncing her name correctly. If I'm not, forgive me. But that TED Talk, she speaks about what is the danger of the single story. And you won't know what a single story is until you've watched the video. So you can't really address this discussion prompt until you've watched that. So for this discussion, here's where you want to write this down. These are your instructions. I want you to tell your single story and your real story, and tell the difference between those two things. Write about the difference. Where does it break down? Where does your single story end and your real story begin? Maybe they are one and the same. Maybe your single story, this conception that everyone has of you just by looking at you, is your real actual story as well. I don't know. Chances are there's a breakdown there somewhere. There's some aspect of your identity that doesn't comport to what people see when they just look at you. So in a paragraph or so, or however you want to approach this, you can devote one paragraph to your single story, one paragraph to your real story, one paragraph as to how they're different. Or you can treat it all as one thing. That's up to you. But you need to, in your discussion, tell us what your single story is, tell us what your real story is, and how those two things are, where the breakdown is, how they're different. You also need to reply to two others' discussions. Now, to prepare yourself for writing about your single story and your real story, I want you to basically make 3 different lists. In one column, I want you to list your visible social identities. So that would be your race, the gender you present as, your approximate age, any apparent, meaning that someone can tell if you're disabled or have a special ability. If you're 6'7" and lean, chances are people will assume that you would make a great basketball player. That would be an ability. If you are bound to a wheelchair, people will see just by looking at you that you cannot walk, at least at this moment in time. So that would be an apparent disability. If you wear a hearing aid that is visible, that would be an apparent disability. So anything that's visible about you in terms of your social identity, make a list of those things. Then make a list of your invisible identities. This would be your religion or sexual orientation, your immigration status, your relationship status. And again, it could be an ability or a disability that isn't apparent upon looking at you. Only include things you are comfortable discussing in a class forum. But I encourage you to embrace the vulnerability of this exercise and to really get to know one another by addressing these concepts, these identity hallmarks. Finally, make a list of your personal identity traits, and these are things that are completely invisible. And that would be your behaviors, your beliefs, your values, etc. Once you've done that, you've got a pretty good groundwork for addressing this discussion prompt. Your single story would be those visible social identities. Your class. If you're wearing a Ralph Lauren polo shirt, and nice pleated chinos that fit well, and shiny dress shoes, someone will assume that you're middle class and not poverty stricken or not underclass. So clothing does have something to do with that visible social identity, not to the extent that it did in the past, say at the turn of the 20th century, but it's still, that is a factor as well. And there are some invisible identities that are visible. If a woman is wearing a burqa, we can assume that she is Muslim. Or Catholics are more likely to wear a crucifix than Protestants, who would more likely wear a cross if they're wearing tokens of their religion or jewelry that identifies their religion. So sometimes there's some overlap here, but by and large, there's visible social identities, invisible identities, and then personal identity traits that are completely invisible upon first appearance of somebody. So make a list of these things and then tell us your real story, your single story, what someone would assume about you or generalize about you, and how those two things are different, if indeed they are at all. And then make sure you reply to 2 others' discussion prompt and have real conversations about this. I encourage that. This last major essay that we're going to work on will deal with oppressed and marginalized groups. So this is a kind of exercise in empathy and trying to understand our fellow humans a little bit better and dig beneath the surface. All right, if you have any questions, email me. If this wasn't clear, let me know. Again, how you approach this discussion is up to you, but you need to include a discussion of your single story, your real story, and how those two things are different. Thank you.